Hi, welcome back to Fresh Faces New Ideas. My name is David. If you're new to the channel or you like the channel and want to keep up to date with all the videos that I post, please like and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. Now, for this one, we're going to cover the end of the joint session speech. I have the other parts already up, and let's just get into it, finish this up.
You know, there's a broad consensus of economists left, right, and center, and they agree what I'm proposing will help create millions of jobs and generate historic economic growth. These are among the highest values investments we can make as a nation. I've often said our greatest strength is the power of our example, not just the example of our power. In my conversations with world leaders, and I've spoken to over 38, 40 of them now, I've made it known that America's back. And you know what they say? The comment I hear most of all from them? So they say, we see America's back, but for how long?
I mean, this is a good response because the rapid shifting between Obama to Trump to Biden has really just changed. Like, how can you make a deal with America when you don't know if the next person who becomes president is going to be a lunatic and renege on them? That's part of what's going on with Iran. We broke up the Iran nuclear deal. Then we sanctioned them because they weren't following the deal that we were no longer a part of. And then when we try to get back into it with them, they're like, well, you have to get rid of the taxes that you double taxed us on for these type of things. And Republicans are like, no, that's weakness.
But for how long? My fellow Americans, we have to show not just that we're back, but that we're back to stay. And that we aren't going to go it alone. We're going to do it by leading with our allies. No one nation can deal with all the crises of our time, from terrorism to nuclear proliferation, mass migration, cybersecurity, climate change, as well as what we're experiencing now, pandemics.
Look, that's true. And the answer is not isolationism, because that just makes it worse. That leaves a power vacuum.
There's no wall high enough to keep any virus out. And our own vaccine.
Wrong. If you'd finished the wall, then the immigrants would have given us COVID, because the COVID came from Europe and the immigrants came from...
supply as it grows to meet our needs, and we're meeting them, will become an arsenal for vaccines for other countries, just as America is an arsenal for democracy for the world.
Well, this goes back to Bill Gates too, but we should waive the patents on the vaccines so that poorer countries can produce the vaccines. Part of why India is in so bad shape is because of who's running it, but also because they don't have access to vaccines. The longer we take to vaccinate the globe, the more likely we are going to have variants. And the more variants there are, the more likely we're going to hit a section where the vaccines don't handle it anymore, and we might end up in another side of lockdown because of another semi-pandemic. So, vaccinating everybody is a good idea.
And the consequence influence the world. But every American will have access before that occurs. Every American.
I'm pretty sure we have access. I think we have way more than we need at this point. The problem is Americans are like, yeah, I don't want the vaccine because I don't want to change my DNA like an idiot. Or, yeah, I don't want to be chipped. Yeah. Or Tucker Carlson, it doesn't work because I'm Tucker Carlson and I don't know anything.
Have access to be fully covered by COVID-19 from the vaccines we have. Look, the climate crisis is not our fight alone, it's a global fight. The United States accounts, as all of you know, less than 15% of carbon emissions. The rest of the world accounts for 85%. That's why I kept my commitment to
100 massive corporations produce 70% of all carbon, of all pollution. but they managed to convince Americans that it's on you individually to stop it.
Join the Paris Accord, because if we do everything perfectly, it's not going to only matter. I kept my commitment to convene a climate summit right here in America with all the major economies of the world: China, Russia, India, European Union. And I said I'd do it in my first 100 days. I want to be very blunt about it. My attempt was to make sure that the world could see there was a consensus, that we are at an inflection point in history. The consensus is if we act to save the planet, we can create millions of jobs and economic growth and opportunity to raise the standard of living of almost everyone around the world. If you watched any of it and you were all busy, I'm sure you didn't have much time. That's what virtually every nation said, even the ones that aren't doing their fair share. The investments I propose tonight also advance the foreign policy.
Before we get into that, another way to help deal with climate change is if we have the advancements for producing cheap solar panels, cheap windmills, cheaper cars that are electric, we could sell them to other countries.
In my view, that benefits the middle class. That means making sure every nation plays by the same rules in the global economy, including China. My discussions...
Now, something he doesn't mention here, but I wish he did, was this idea of a universal, a global minimum wealth tax, minimum corporation tax, so that the lowest that it could possibly be, so that corporations aren't fighting against countries in order to pay no taxes.
In my discussion with President Xi, I told him, we welcome the competition. We're not looking for conflict. But I made absolutely clear that we will defend America's interest across the board. America will stand up to unfair trade practices that undercut American workers and American industries, like subsidies from state to state-owned operations and enterprises, and the theft of American technology and intellectual property. I also told President Xi that we'll maintain a strong military presence in the Indo-Pacific, just as we do with NATO and Europe, not to start a conflict, but to prevent one. I told them what I've said to many world leaders, that America will not back away from our commitments, our commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms, and to our alliances. And I pointed out to him, no responsible American president could remain silent when basic human rights are being so blatantly violated. An American president has to represent the essence of what our country stands for. America is an idea, the most unique idea in history. We are created, all of us, equal. It's who we are. And we cannot walk away from that principle and, in fact, say we're dealing with the American idea. With regard to Russia, I know it concerns some of you, but I made very clear to Putin that we're not going to seek escalation, but their actions will have consequences. They turn out to be true, and they turned out to be true. So I responded directly and proportionally to Russia's interference in our elections and the cyber attacks on our government and our business.
So for all those Russiagate is fake, yeah, multiple different committees said Russia interfered in our election. Also, they had a massive cyber hack into like every major part of our government, and Trump was like, yeah, you know, whatever. Had no response to that. So yeah, good sanctions.
They did both of these things, and I told them we would respond, and we have. We can also cooperate when it's our mutual interest. We did it when we extended the New START Treaty on nuclear arms, and we're working to do it on climate change. But he understands we will respond. On Iran and North Korea, nuclear programs that present serious threats to American security and the security of the world. We're going to be working closely with our allies to address the threats posed by both of these countries through diplomacy as well as stern deterrence.
So, two things here. One, Trump, to his credit, did try something different with North Korea. It didn't work, but, he tried something different. On Iran, they decided, okay, instead of having Iran have nuclear weapons at some point, start working on nuclear weapons at some point in the next decade, we're going to let them start working on nuclear weapons now. And that's what happened.
And American leadership means ending the forever war in Afghanistan. We have without hyperbole, the greatest fighting force in the history of the world. I'm the first president in 40 years who knows what it means to have a son serving in a war zone. Today, we have service members serving in the same war zone as their parents did. We have service members in Afghanistan who are not yet born on 9/11. The war in Afghanistan, as we remember the debates here, were never meant to be multi-generational undertakings of nation building. We went to Afghanistan to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11. And we said we would follow Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell to do it. If you've been in the upper Konar Valley, you've kind of seen the gates of hell. And we delivered justice to bin Laden. We degraded the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home.
Look, we destabilized this region. Us staying there is being a moniker of stability. I don't know how ultimately we solve this. There's going to be a pushback once we leave, but us being there is not making things better.
Look, even as we do, we'll maintain over-the-horizon capacity to suppress future threats to the homeland. And make no mistake, in 20 years, terrorism has metastasized. The threat has evolved way beyond Afghanistan. Those of you in the intelligence committees, the foreign relations committee, defense committees, you know well, we have to remain vigilant against the threats to the United States wherever they come from. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are in Yemen, Syria, Somalia, other places in Africa, in the Middle East, and beyond. And we won't ignore what our intelligence agencies have determined to be the most lethal terrorist threat to the homeland today. White supremacy is terrorism.
And now all the right-wingers are going to be mad. White supremacy is not a real thing. No, it's not a real threat. What about Antifa? The statistics prove you are wrong. Statistically speaking, almost every single act, though in 2019, every single act of political violence and terrorism was caused by a right-winger. Every single one. They changed, because they tied some of the riots, so they claimed that was Antifa, and they tied some of a lot of eco-terrorism to left-wing groups, but it's the growing threat is terrorism from the right wing.
We're not going to ignore that either. My fellow Americans, look, we have to come together to heal the soul of this nation. It was nearly a year ago before her father's funeral when I spoke with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's young daughter. She's a little tyke, so I was kneeling down to talk to her so I could look her in the eye. She looked at me, she said, "My daddy changed the world."
It's worth mentioning that in a recent poll, 46% of Republicans said that the verdict in the Derek Chauvin trial was wrong.
Well, after the conviction of George Floyd's murderer, we can see how right she was if we have the courage to act as a Congress. We've all seen the knee of injustice on the neck of Black Americans. Now's our opportunity to make some real progress. The vast majority of men and women wearing a uniform and a badge serve our communities, and they serve them honorably. I know them. I know they want... I know they want to help meet this moment as well. My fellow Americans, we have to come together to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they serve, to root out systemic racism in our criminal justice system, and to enact police reform in George Floyd's name that passed the House already.
Look, systemic racism exists. There's not legitimate laws on it, but there's data to prove that it is an issue.
I know Republicans have their own ideas and are engaged in a very productive discussions with Democrats in the Senate. We need to work
To
together.
be fair, the current discussions seem to be much more effective than the previous ones of last year. But who knows? Who knows what it comes to? So, I mean, Tim Scott does deserve some credit for actually just having serious discussions about this.
And find a consensus. But let's get it done next month, by the first anniversary of George Floyd's death.
I mean, this has to get bipartisan support because it's not going to fit into reconciliation. So if they can't do it by next month or they can't pass this at all, it's on the Republicans.
The country supports this reform, and Congress should act. We have a giant opportunity to bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, real justice. And with the plans outlined tonight, we have a real chance to root out systemic racism that plagues America and American lives in other ways. A chance to deliver real equity, good jobs, good schools, affordable housing, clean air, clean water, being able to generate wealth and pass it down through generations because you have an access to purchase a house. Real opportunities in the lives of more Americans, Black, white, Latino, Asian Americans, Native Americans. Look, I also want to thank the United States Senate for voting 94-1 to pass COVID-19 hate crimes.
Yeah, fuck you, Josh Hawley. And probably Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, who just didn't happen to be there.
Act to protect Asian American and Pacific Islanders. You acted decisively. You can see on television the viciousness of the hate crimes we've seen over the past year and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans.
I've talked about this. All it does is says you can't really discriminate against gay people and you can't discriminate against trans people. But apparently that's bad.
For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back.
Hold on, we're going to roll that back because what he just said is like really, really important.
Decisively. You can see on television the viciousness of the hate crimes we've seen over the past year and for too long. I urge the House to do the same and send that legislation to my desk, which I will gladly, anxiously sign. I also hope Congress will get to my desk the Equality Act to protect LGBTQ Americans. For all transgender Americans watching at home, especially young people, you're so brave. I want you to know your president has your back.
This is incredibly important that he said that statement because there are dozens of bills attacking trans people, and even Republicans don't support these bills. So the fact that he said this is great.
Another thing, let's authorize the Violence Against Women Act, which has been law for 27 years. "27 years ago, I wrote it. It'll close the act that has to be authorized now, will close the boyfriend loophole to keep guns out of the hands of abusers. The court order said this is an abuser. You can't own a gun. It's to close that loophole.
Because this failed. It failed because of Republicans. Republicans are pro-abusers having firearms. You have to be charged and convicted of abuse. at least at a misdemeanor level, in order for this to affect you. So you are for abusers having firearms, and that is statistically likely for them to kill people. That's what the Republican Party is standing for by being against this legislation.
Existed. You know, it's estimated that 50 women are shot and killed by an intimate partner every month in America. 50 a month. Let's pass it and save some lives. And I need not tell anyone this, but gun violence has become an epidemic in America. The flag at the White House was still flying at half-mast for the 8 victims of the mass shooting in Georgia. When 10 more lives...
Daily mass shootings. The police kill 3 people a day. We have shootings every single day in America. 22 veterans kill themselves every day.
Taken in a mass shooting in Colorado. And in the week in between those 2 events, 250 other Americans were shot dead in the streets of America. 250 shot dead. I know how hard it is to make progress on this issue. In the 90s, we passed universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that hold 100 rounds that can be fired off in seconds. We beat
I'm glad they switched to Boebert here because her whole thing is guns.
Mass shootings and gun violence decline. Check out the report over 10 years. But in the early 2000s, the law expired. We've seen daily bloodshed since. I'm not saying if the law continued, we wouldn't see bloodshed. More than 2 weeks ago in the Rose Garden, surrounded by some of the bravest people I know, the survivors and families who lost loved ones to gun violence, I laid out several of the Department of Justice actions that are being taken to impact on this epidemic. One of them...
I discussed them. They were pretty much weak sauce and garbage.
...is banning so-called ghost guns. These are homemade guns built from a kit that includes directions how to finish the firearm. The parts have no serial numbers, so they show up at crime scenes and they can't be traced. The buyers of these ghost gun kits aren't required to pass any background check. Anyone, from a criminal or terrorist, could buy this kit and within 30 minutes have a weapon that's lethal, but no more. And I'll do everything in my power to protect the American people from this epidemic of gun violence, but it's time for Congress to act as well.
The answer is not more guns. We have more guns than people. If guns was the answer, we wouldn't have this problem.
Look, I don't want to become confrontational, but we need more Senate Republicans to join the overwhelming majority of Democratic colleagues and close the loopholes required in background check purchases of guns. We need a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And don't tell me it can't be done. We did it before and it worked. Talk to most responsible gun owners and hunters. They'll tell you there's no possible justification for having 100 rounds in a weapon. What do you think, deer wearing Kevlar vests? They'll tell you that there are too many people today who are able to buy a gun.
Even if the deer were wearing Kevlar vests, we sell bullets that can punch through that for reasons.
But shouldn't be able to buy a gun. These kinds of reasonable reforms have overwhelming support from the American people, including many gun owners. The country supports reform and Congress should act. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. And no amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. From the very beginning, there were certain guns, weapons, that could not be owned by Americans. Certain people could not
Everyone should have a tactical nuke.
own those weapons ever. We're not changing the Constitution. We're being reasonable. I think this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I think it's an American issue. And here's what else we can do. Immigration has always been essential to America. Let's end our exhausting war over immigration. For more than 30 years, politicians have talked about immigration reform, and we've done nothing about it. It's time to fix it. On day one of my presidency, I kept my commitment and sent a comprehensive immigration bill to the United States Congress. If you believe we need to secure the border, pass it because it has a lot of money for high-tech border security. If you believe in a pathway to citizenship, pass it.
He poisoned the bill by putting in pathway to citizenship. We can't have that. They're illegals. We must kill them.
There's over 11 million undocumented folks, the vast majority of here overstaying visas. Pass it. We can actually, if you actually want to solve a problem, I've sent a bill to take a close look at it. We also have to get at the root problem of why people are fleeing.
Good old Ted Cruz falling asleep during this. Also, Ted Cruz, I thought you weren't wearing a mask. Fucking jackass.
Particularly to our southern border from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. The violence, the corruption, the gangs, the political instability, hunger, hurricanes, earthquakes, natural disasters.
According to Republicans, none of these things are actually impacting it. All it is because Joe Biden is president, and therefore he ended the Trump ideas, and that's why we have immigration. Even though Trump both simultaneously finished and had not finished the wall, or is finishing the wall, it's irrelevant.
My president, when I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root causes of migration. And it helped keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but the last administration decided it was not worth it. I'm restoring the program and asked Vice President Harris to lead our diplomatic effort to take care of this. I have absolute confidence she'll get the job done. Now look, if you don't like my plan, let's at least pass what we all agree on. Congress needs to pass legislation this year to finally secure protection for dreamers. The young people have only known America as their home.
Dreamers are the kids who came here from illegal immigrants who've been here their whole lives. You want to just send them back to a random ass country? That's what Republicans are proposing.
And permanent protection for immigrants who are here on temporary protective status who came from countries beset by man-made and natural-made violence and disaster, as well as a pathway to citizenship for farm workers who put food on our tables. Look, immigrants have done so much for America during this pandemic and throughout our history. The country supports immigration reform. We should act. Let's argue over it. Let's debate it. But let's act. And if we truly want to restore the soul of America, we need to protect the sacred right to vote. Most people more people voted in the last presidential election than any time in American history. In the middle of the worst pandemic ever. It should be celebrated. Instead, it's being attacked. Congress should pass H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and send it to my desk.
Reminder, Joe Manchin thinks that bill would cause another insurrection, even though he has no idea what he's talking about, because his argument is, oh, people don't trust the election system. Yeah, because they've been lying about it.
The country supports it, and Congress should act now. Look, in conclusion, as we gather here tonight, the image of a violent mob assaulting this Capitol, desecrating our democracy, remain vivid in all our minds. Lives were put at risk, many of your lives. Lives were lost. Extraordinary courage was summoned. The insurrection was an existential crisis, a test of whether our democracy could survive, and it did. But the struggle is far from over. The question of whether our democracy will long endure is both ancient and urgent. As old as our republic, still vital today. Can our democracy deliver on its promise that all of us, created equal in the image of God, had a chance to lead lives of dignity, respect, and possibility? Can our democracy deliver to the most pressing needs of our people? Can our democracy overcome the lies, anger, hate, and fears that have pulled us apart? America's adversaries, the autocrats of the world, are betting we can't. And I promise you they're betting we can't. They believe we're too full of anger and division and rage. They look at the images of the mob that assaulted the Capitol as proof that the sun is setting on American democracy. But they're wrong. You know it, I know it. But we have to prove them wrong. We have to prove democracy still works, that our government still works, and we can deliver for our people. In our first 100 days together, we've acted to restore people's faith in democracy to deliver. We're vaccinating the nation. We're creating hundreds of thousands of new jobs. We're delivering real results to people. They can see it and feel it in their own lives. Opening doors of opportunity, guaranteeing some more fairness and justice. That's the essence of America. That's democracy in action. Our Constitution opens with the words, as trite as it sounds, we the people. Well, it's time to remember that we the people are the government. You and I. Not some force in a distant capital. Not some powerful force that we have no control over. It's us.
This is a good statement. Look, people say, oh, it's we the people, not we the government. But like, we make up the government. They work for us. And when they don't do the things we want, we vote them out.
The people. In another era, when our democracy was tested, Franklin Roosevelt reminded us, in America, we do our part. We all do our part. That's all I'm asking. That we do our part, all of us. And if we do that, we will meet the center challenge of the age by proving that democracy is durable and strong. Autocrats will not win the future. We will. America will. And the future belongs to America. As I stand here tonight before you in a new and vital hour of life and democracy of our nation, and I can say with absolute confidence, I have never been more confident or optimistic about America. Not because I'm president, because of what's happening with the American people. We've stared into the abyss of insurrection and autocracy, pandemic and pain, and we, the people, did not flinch. At the very moment our adversaries were certain we'd pull apart and fail, we came together, we united. With light and hope, we summoned a new strength, new resolve to position us to win the competition of the 21st century. On our way to a union more perfect, more prosperous, and more just. As one people, one nation, and one America. Folks, as I told every world leader I've ever met with over the years, it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America, and it still isn't. We're the United States of America. There is not a single thing, nothing beyond our capacity. We can do whatever we set our minds to if we do it together. So let's begin to get together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Look, there's a lot there. His foreign policy is a little more hawkish than I would like. But, that's the thing. I don't understand how you could watch this speech and think, oh, he's driving us away. He's being divisive. He's not a divisive person. If you're against these things, it's because you don't agree with the American people. If you think the insurrection didn't happen or wasn't bad, you're a lunatic. I'm happy with most of what he's done so far. I look forward to him pushing to actually get something else done. So please, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.